Welcome to the Music Journal podcast, where we talk about the hottest things happening in music right now, and also how you can apply it if you're an aspiring producer or musician yourself. I'm your host, Wes Yee. I'm a producer, artist, and educator, and I'm stoked to be chatting with you. Let's make history. Welcome to another episode of the Music Journal podcast. Today we have Ben Wilde, who is the owner of Soundsauce Studios. He's worked with one of the Spice Girls, the Arctic Monkeys, Take That, and other gold and number one selling artists in the UK. He's primarily a mastering engineer, which is super dope, and I feel like it's a really underrated part of the music making process, and if it's not done correctly, then it can really make or break a record. So I actually randomly found Ben on a Facebook group that we're both a part of, and I was really impressed. He gets a lot of his business off of the internet, running ads and stuff like that, and doing marketing, and he does a lot of promo for other artists as well. So I definitely wanted to get him on the show and talk about all these things. He's kind of a jack of all trades. So Ben, welcome to the Music Journal, man.
Hey, thanks, man.
So I gave like a little brief synopsis of, I guess, who you are and what you do, but if you want to fill in some of the gaps, feel free right now.
Yeah, sure. So my company's Soundsauce. I'm a mastering engineer. I've been doing audio for like 10 years, or over 10 years actually. Like I've been playing piano since like I was a kid, and I was just really lucky because one of the the city I grew up in the UK, has this amazing music scene. So actually, I ended up interning in like a bunch of studios. I think I had a really interesting journey in that I never actually really wanted to be an engineer, an audio engineer. I was actually like really trying to build a career that actually is sensible and is going to be like a regular income thing. I was trying to be a web developer.
Oh, wow.
At one point I was trying to be like a game developer, and I've always been quite into programming. So I think my story is kind of different from a lot of engineers you'll hear, because a lot of engineers will be trying to like make their audio business work like for their whole lives. And for me, like I wasn't trying at all. But I kind of actually found more success in audio. So I started my own studio, my own recording studio, like 5 years ago. And things kind of just went from there. I mean, I found that I love mastering, and that I'm really good at it, and that, like you say, it's a really, really important part of the production process. And I think things are really changing in mastering right now, and they're going to keep changing for the next year or two. And so we're Soundsauce, and it's me and my team, and we're kind of we're audio engineers. We like to be we consider ourselves kind of industry experts by this point. Mm-hmm. We do a bunch of things. So as well as mastering, and mastering wise, we do a lot of things that no other mastering studio can do, because actually we're bringing back this tradition of like recording studios building their own stuff. So you used to find like in Abbey Road Studios or like some of the really big studios here in the UK, they would build all of the equipment like in-house themselves. So that's something that we do as well. So fortunately, the team around me, like we all have this kind of traditional engineer background. So we build most of the software that we use in-house. We build most of the equipment we use in-house as well. Wow. We do a bunch of stuff that like no other studio can do. And I'm really proud of that.
Dude, I think that's amazing. I think it's funny too, and a really authentic approach that you kind of took, because you wanted to do one thing, but it just kind of happened that you were an intern at one point, and then that's kind of the traditional engineer route, as you start interning at a studio and then maybe you become an engineer at the studio. But then a lot of these guys ultimately end up owning their own studios. So it's kind of funny how that worked out. And I think the fact that you're building your own outboard gear and everything is really incredible too. I think it's something that a lot of these engineers are not doing currently. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of people are really just working in the box in 2019, I feel like. So I think it's a nice change that you're kind of bringing to the table. I could talk about mixing and mastering all day, man. Do you prefer working in the box, or do you prefer kind of hybrid mixing, or what's your workflow process like?
I mean, as a mastering engineer, I think there are a lot of like engineers that do mixing and mastering, and oftentimes they'll get away with having like non-mastering gear. But at Soundsauce, all of our stuff is built to like high-end mastering specifications. So we generally work with things that are really, really precise. So generally we work with digital gear. Like everything is really finely stepped. Everything is like recallable, obviously. What we do though to counteract that is that we have a modified Studer reel-to-reel that we use. So if anyone wants, like a half-inch tape machine. So if anyone comes to us that really wants maybe a more authentic or a retro feel, or they want, I don't know, there's certain sounds that tape really, really lends itself to. And even like artists that come to us that maybe produce EDM or drum and bass. I mean, we did a drum and bass record just last week that we put through the tape. And it's actually, it's kind of in demand. I mean, there's a real authenticity about it. So yeah, it's kind of hybrid in that sense. And we don't master particularly in the box, but we do use mostly digital gear.
Dude, that's awesome. How did you get into the whole mastering thing? Like, what made you want to gravitate towards that as opposed to mixing and opposed to recording and any of the other things you could have done engineering wise?
Yeah, well, actually, I didn't really master a track until like 6 years ago. I mean, I've been working, like I say, in audio for over a decade, but most of that time I was recording, and my first business was a recording studio, and I hated it so much.
Really? No way.
I really hated it.
Why?
Like, I mean, I don't know. There's something about people management that's just maybe not me.
Yeah.
That I'm really good at knowing exactly what I want and exactly like the process I want to take, and like I know myself so well. And I find it really frustrating when people kind of don't follow that. Like that, I know that's why I really struggled with recording myself. I'm not very good at these things. But I think as an engineer and as an entrepreneur, you have to find the thing that really suits you as a person. I think I ended up going from being like a bricks and mortar recording studio, which we did fairly well. Obviously, I learned a lot of those skills there, but it's not my natural thing to do.
I feel that. I worked at a recording studio too for a number of years with this guy Mike Moss. He's a Grammy nominated engineer, and it is stressful, man. There's a lot of components to it that make it not necessarily the easiest path to take, which is funny because I feel like so many of my colleagues and people that I know who are audio people are trying to do the whole recording studio thing, but as a lot of music is kind of gravitating towards electronic drums and stuff that you can really just do on a computer at your home, it's really hard to build a sustainable business. And then I totally agree too with the whole managing people, and if you have a whole band that's supposed to show up and then people don't show up, or people come and they're not prepared or whatever, there's a lot of components to it that you don't really get in the mastering stage.
Yeah, well, there was so much of that. And also the fact that, like you say, I mean, it's probably not a particularly good time to get into recording right now. It's not like a booming industry right now. You know, I mean, the number of studios, the number of big studios that are shutting down now is quite depressing.
It is, for real.
It is. Like some of the studios that I actually interned in, like about 8 years ago, they've shut down like in such a short time, and it's depressing to see. And the numbers when I was running my studio reflected that. I mean, we didn't do particularly well. It was a small town, which probably didn't help. And everybody knows how to record stuff at home nowadays.
It's true. They might not do the best job per se.
No.
But yeah, it is so easy to just hit the R on GarageBand or whatever, or Garbage Band, as I've heard it called.
Well, yeah, but it's a frustration for us. We're always trying to persuade people that they need to come out of their bedroom and they need to, I think the number of musicians that there are versus the number of musicians that are really, really invested and really want to do something with their music and really want to sort of get to the next level, it's not a high percentage.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. So what are you doing differently to kind of seek out the serious artists that you want to be working with and mastering for and running promo and everything? Because I know you've had a lot of success using Facebook ads and stuff like that and using digital marketing. Yeah.
So, one of the things that we're really good at as a team is that almost all of us have done marketing at some point in our careers. Like I used to actually be like a freelance web developer, I think I said. And like at the age of 14, I became the lead web developer of quite a big media production agency in my city.
Wow.
So like I've done marketing for like a lot of my life. And as a big part of what we do, Facebook ads is probably the biggest part of our marketing campaigns. We do a bunch of stuff. We have a lot of avenues for marketing, and some of them are quite untraditional. But yeah, Facebook ads is the main one, and through the great thing about Facebook ads obviously is what we can do with targeting.
Yeah, 100%.
So we've seen on that Facebook group, that Facebook community, that a lot of the people in our industry kind of don't put a lot of time into planning, into learning, into researching. And that stuff is so important for Facebook. So a lot of people in our industry will have a go at Facebook ads, and they'll not see much of an instant result in terms of like revenue, and they'll just give up and they'll say, okay, that didn't work. But actually, obviously, Facebook requires a lot more commitment than that. Actually, it's taken us several years to get to this point where we have our audiences set up, and we're actually quite happy with them. We've figured out ways where we can target people who are actually really serious about their music. So the first step is obviously reaching musicians. Like, what interests do musicians share? And you've got to figure that out. But then on top of that, like, which musicians do you want to reach? Like, I don't want to reach musicians who are maybe at a certain level, who aren't looking for professional mastering yet, who aren't really wanting to scale or grow. So we target in demographic. We target people by like the level of schooling they've had, because obviously we're not particularly trying to target high school kids. We target people who have taken courses from certain universities and certain colleges.
Smart.
We do a bunch of stuff. One of the things we figured out early on is we were thinking, what do people do when they really want to take their music career seriously? And we figured they'll go to music college, but they don't necessarily go to like a traditional music college. They'll probably go to maybe an online music production college. So we made a list of those and we target those, and that does really well for us.
It's really smart, man. And it is true. I think Facebook ads are really the future of marketing because of the targeting, like you said. If you think about it, there's X number of billions of people on Facebook. And if you're an artist listening to this too, of those X number of billions, your 1,000 true fans are out there, which is a concept that we talk about a lot on this show, the concept of the true fans. But at the end of the day, you have to figure out how to reach them, because it is true. A lot of people will try to run a Facebook ad. Like, it's so easy to just click the boost post button that Facebook just kind of gives you there, and they make it so big, and they'll shoot you a notification to just give it a shot. And it is true. It's really hard to kind of see success with it because it is so vague. But if you kind of dive deep into it and kind of do a little bit of research and do what Ben's talking about and figure out which demographics you need to be trying to reach, then it is definitely possible to use paid advertising to reach those people that you're trying to ultimately reach at the end of the day. I'm curious, man, how do you compete with other people kind of going for the same demographics? We were emailing a little bit back and forth, and I mentioned Landr. Like, there's a lot of weird services that I've kind of looked into a little bit, but never seriously considered using. Like, I guess we'll take Landr as the example, but this is a service that does quote unquote like automatic mastering, right? What's your take on that, and how do you compete with them? Hey, we'll be back in the episode in just 2 seconds, but before that, I do want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors. So for all you aspiring producers and artists out there, I can't even begin to tell you how important having a mentor was to me. I would literally not be where I am today if it wasn't for people like Mike Moss, who is a 3-time Grammy Award nominee. He got me my first credit. And Prince Charles Alexander, who's recorded Biggie and Alicia Keys. I wouldn't have been able to continue to grow and progress in my craft if it wasn't for them. So if you've been listening to the show and you heard episode 19 with Kato on the track, you know he's produced for B.O.B., Joyner Lucas, Hobson. He got token viral with his contest before anybody even knew who he was, and he totally blew up. The reason I'm telling you this is because he just opened up a mentorship program that will transition your music from being a side hustle to a career. If you want to learn the secrets from people at the top of the industry, go to bit.ly/TMJ mentor and you can try it for free. That's bit.ly/TMJ mentor.
So Landr is obviously like a really big topic for mastering engineers right now, and I think the most frustrating thing for us about Landr is that it's just confusing people. So I think people don't really understand what mastering is anymore, and I honestly think that while there's a beauty about Landr, because to be fair, I mean, admittedly, if you're going to put a song through Landr, 9 times out of 10 it's going to come out sounding like prettier, right? It's going to come out sounding better. But at the same time, you've known a bunch of engineers, and how many of them have you known who've had this one piece of gear that they swear by, that they put everything they do through this compressor, the oral exciter or whatever they use, and they're just convinced that everything just sounds better when it comes out the other side, right?
I mean, at the end of the day, it's still an art form too. Like, you still have to know how to use the gear, you still have to use the human ears. But yeah, a lot of people do have that one thing that they swear by, or they have multiple that they use for different things. So they'll have like one compressor for this, one for this, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Well, I kind of see Landr as a similar thing. Like, I don't really subscribe to the idea that it's really mastering, because I think what Landr does is kind of more of just an effect. I mean, it doesn't seem to do a lot more than there are probably dozens of plugins that do similar things, with either just require a little bit of tweaking, or there's even a handful of audio plugins you can use that actually use AI as well, to sort of do mixing for you and do mastering for you. But I honestly think mastering is something very different to that. I think, I mean, our job as mastering engineers, believe it or not, it's not to make songs sound pretty. That's not what we're here to do. I mean, by the time they're being submitted to us, hopefully they already sound pretty right. Good.
Yeah.
I mean, our job is, before anything else, is to look at this and say, is this going to stand up? Is this going to, in the sea that is Spotify and Apple Music, if this track ends up being in a 500 song playlist, is this going to be one of those 10 that actually jumps out at you and that you add to your library? Because, I see mastering as kind of comparable to like getting dressed in the dark.
Ooh, interesting.
Okay, because say you have like this really important meeting one day, and it's gonna influence your career for the next year or two, and you can't turn the light on because, I don't know, your partner's sleeping or something. So you have to get dressed in the dark, and you're just kind of grabbing things that feel right, and you're putting it on, and you leave the house and you go to that meeting without ever checking the mirror, without ever like seeing how you look.
Right.
And I find it really comparable. Actually, a lot of people are releasing music or self-releasing music that hasn't been assessed by a professional, like in the mastering stage. And I think it's kind of a similar thing, is you're putting music out there and you don't really know how that's going to stand up. You don't know if that meets the standards that we expect nowadays. Like, you know.
I totally agree, man. I mean, you've spent years on your craft, probably decades. I don't know how old you are, how long you've been kind of at this, but I know people who have been doing this for their entire lives, just dedicated just to mastering alone. And if you ask them if they've mastered mastering, they'd probably say no. So right. I think it's definitely a little bit naive to think that just one application, this artificial intelligence, can replicate what this human being has spent so many years trying to do. Plus, at the end of the day, too, if you hand your stems off to 10 different mixing and mastering engineers, you're going to end up with 10 different products.
Right.
So I think it's important to kind of hone into the sound that you want, and then find somebody who kind of sees the same vision and can ultimately help you get to that goal and get that sonic quality that you're looking for in your record.
Yeah, because obviously, I mean, how the AI mastering works and how AI works is it's a piece of software that you train. So it takes an input of, I'm sure they've trained it on thousands of songs. But what AIs are good at is finding patterns and finding averages. So if you upload like an 80s disco style track or something that you've been working on, it will probably figure out that it is an 80s disco style track because it will match the average that it has of 80s disco style tracks. And it will look at how your 80s disco style track differs from the average. So, you know, if the overall loudness of your track is lower than the average, it will increase it. So it's like average. It's same for EQ, you know? That's kind of how AI works. But obviously, an average track is a bad track nowadays. In this day and age, I mean, like I say, it's a C. Spotify is a C.
Yeah.
And the only way of being listened to is by being like well above average.
I agree.
Unfortunately, Landr doesn't do well above average. It's just not what it does.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
In that sense, I think that, I mean, it's awesome. You can spend a few dollars and get and make your track sound a little better. But it's, if you actually want to take your music seriously, if you're actually trying to achieve something, that's Landr, unfortunately, is not the direction to go in right now.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
What's your take on the whole AI thing kind of coming into the music industry at all? Like, what's your take on the fact that people are trying to create products that are based off of artificial intelligence to enhance or even put their hands on art? Because at the end of the day, art comes from human beings. And my opinion of it, I guess, is that I don't think that putting a brain that's not a human brain to it makes a lot of sense. But what do you think?
I think probably art is surely the one area that the AI doesn't really particularly belong to. But what I would say is that so far, what we have in the music industry in terms of AI is yes, we have mastering. I think that's probably the big thing. We started to explore like AI's composing music itself and AI mixing slightly, but at this point we're still, I think it's just a hype thing. I actually think Landr is going to struggle the next year or two, and I could be wrong, but I think that the hype will start to drop off a little bit, and people will start to realize that that it's not really there for people who are trying to grow. It's not there for people who are trying to succeed in music. And I think it's going to take a couple of years. I think 2019 is not going to be the year for AI in music. I think it's going to be 2020, 2021. I think that it will be a thing, but I think ultimately it's going to be, well, you know, audio engineers, right? There are some audio engineers that kind of do these repetitive tasks. Like, I could in every studio there'll always be an assistant, and they have to like prep projects and get everything ready and color code everything and label and like they're sorting out the file structures and everything. And we all have to go through that stage, right? We've all been there.
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe that's the kind of thing that AI can take care of. You know.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I agree with that. I had another person on this show too. Her name's Taryn Southern, and she recently put out the first album that was ever produced entirely by AI. And when she first reached out to me, I was thinking like, that sounds like a weird concept. But then we talked about it, and the way she did it is, since she doesn't play any instruments or produce or anything, and hiring a producer can be really expensive, she used this artificial intelligence to create just a skeleton, kind of like a groundwork to start. And then from there, she did heavy editing on her own with what she could do, which is operate a computer and move MIDI data around and stuff like that, and move the notes and stuff, and move the drums and play around with the rhythms. But in terms of actually structuring something to start, that wasn't her field of expertise. So she used AI for that, like the really basic components of production. And then it still ended up being her vision at the end of the day, because she was still able to use her human brain and her creativity for the most part. So I think it's interesting that you think that we can use AI for all of, I guess, the quote unquote like grunt work that the assistants and the interns were originally hired to do. And that could be cool, because then it means that the assistant engineers can actually go in and start learning more instead of having to do all of the mindless, tedious stuff.
Yeah, well, I always say that AI should be there to solve the problems, not to. I mean, there's certain things that we're building AI to do that doesn't, like, they're problems that don't need to be solved, kind of thing. There are problems for music creators. Like, for example, like, this is a really good example. How do you start writing a piece of music when you're not trained? You don't understand music theory, or you don't play an instrument.
Do you have a music theory background?
I do. I kind of.
Same. So
yeah, I do. But you know, like the woman you were talking about, you've had on before. What's her name?
Taryn Southern.
Taryn Southern, right? So she used AI to do, the very groundworks of composing a piece of music, and that's something that a lot of people have problem with. So that makes sense to me, to create an AI that does that solves that problem. Not to say that if people don't have that problem that they should be using it as well. No, I mean, if you can compose music, then always compose music. But I think it's kind of interesting to experiment with these different ways of solving problems.
I think it'd be cool for like writer's block too, because even if you can compose, nobody can compose 100% of the time every single day. Hey, out of curiosity too, do you also mix, or do you primarily master, or what was your process of getting to becoming a mastering engineer?
Yeah, I actually went really gradually. So from being at a recording studio, when I first opened up Soundsauce, it was mixing and mastering, and we kind of just gradually came over to mastering, because we had a couple of projects that, I mean, I think this has been spoken about in that Facebook group we're in, but I had a couple of projects that were kind of cancelled mid-project, and for various reasons, and like our whole income for that month would be gone, or like half of the income for that month would be gone, and so we kind of struggled with that business model, and I think as well, in the current climate and the way that we can easily market to so many people, we don't need to rely on one client for a month's income. It's just not necessary. So, like, for business reasons, and also because we kind of got quite well known for mastering, and a lot of people were coming to us for mastering, it kind of just made sense for us.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that's awesome. I'm going to give you a chance to plug your site and everything and kind of pitch your mastering services. But before I do, there's one question I ask at the end of every episode, and I'm curious what your answer is going to be, actually. If you had unlimited money, no strings attached, what would you do and why?
I've kind of spoken to people about this before, and I honestly don't know exactly what I would do differently. The past year for me, I've started to get my life to this point where I am so happy with like how my life is right now. I mean, I'd like a bit more time to travel. That would be good. So if I could be slightly less hands-on with business and with like the maybe the marketing side of things, if I could
delegate that work a bit more,
that would be awesome. But literally, that's about it. Like, I'm soon going to be moving to Canada.
Oh, cool.
Like in a few months, which
dope.
is so good. So I'd like to be able to afford like a nice place and like to hire a car, but I don't know. I don't really have expensive tastes particularly. So literally, pretty much exactly as I'm doing right now.
I think that's amazing. I guess to kind of redo the question, at a point where things weren't as good and when business wasn't as good, what would you have done then? I guess, would you have done anything differently had you had a little more capital to invest in your business, or would you have done everything the exact same?
I think I would have learned. Okay, so my business has been around for 5 years. The past 2 years, it's been a really serious, like, scalable business. Like the 3 years before that, it's just because I was just putting off learning the skills that I think business people need to learn, like the really big picture stuff. So I think that's what I would have changed. If I could go back to earlier in my career, I would have just committed a lot more time to learning the really, really tough stuff. Like right now, I'm just learning more and more and more about how to like campaign, like marketing wise, like how to build a real campaign for marketing. And I'm like, I probably should have known this 5 years ago. Yeah, I think that if I could give some advice to anyone who's running a business at the kind of stage I was, it would be to like invest so much time into learning, like buy as many, like I have so many books now, and 6 months ago I had probably like 4 books.
Wow, no way.
So
well, hey,
so
you got them now.
Yeah, I got them now. So yeah, that's my advice.
Awesome. Well, we're almost out of time here, but if you want to let everybody know where they can find Soundsauce, if they want to get their tracks mastered professionally by you, I think you offer a free mastering sample, correct?
Yep, I offer a free sample for anyone. I mean, if you just wonder what your music might sound like if it were mastered, if you're just curious, just head over there, get a master done. I mean, I won't hound you or anything. You'll have your sample and you'll know what it'll sound like. If you're looking for a new mastering engineer, there's no harm in giving it a go. If you're not sold on the idea, I mean, we've got a bunch of resources on there that kind of explain mastering in more detail, and you can always just go for that sample. Otherwise, we're quite low rates. We master for people all over the world, and we also have promotion services. So we have like a list of hundreds of influencers in the music industry that we've kind of gathered over the years. So we kind of allow access to that list to our customers. We do some awesome stuff with promotion, marketing, and mastering, and yeah, you should go check it out.
Awesome. And the link to the site will be in the show notes as well, so you guys can check it out there. Ben, thanks for joining me on the Music Journal.
Thank you, Wes. Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Music Journal. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you got a lot out of it. If you want to know more about me and what I do, I just put out a personal EP on Spotify. You can go to bit.ly/Wes Yee Spotify. And if you want to know more about music production, I teach an online course about it too. Just shoot an email to wes@homestudiohits.com and I'll send you an application. Just for filling out the application, I'll send you a free sample pack of sounds I use to make the instrumental you're listening to and more. All these links will be available in the show notes, so you can check them out there. And while you're there, if you feel inclined to rate this show 5 stars, that would really help me out. Other than that, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Thanks again. Peace.